want us to come up? I'm gonna go sit over there, so you can sit by me now.
Sure.
Because we'll let you kind of either present from here, or you can present from the table, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you're more comfortable with. You want to stand?
Sure.
Okay, but you're more than happy, you're more than welcome to sit next to me now. Right? Yeah. You don't have to. That's exactly what
But they'll know where to look. They'll know where to look, because they do mostly corners. But they will know as they're being prepared.
you will be seeing this.
Yeah, look.
Hi, there.
That was so nice of you.
Hillary.
You brought us down next street. Are those for me? He goes, no, those are for the girls in the office.
That was good.
Guy there, or something.
Thank you.
She is, yeah.
Oh, this is the sewer study.
Thank you.
Nice shot, girl.
Hey, watch yourself.
I need more sleep.
Your general.
A little wider angle, move it forward over the
I
top of the
can't even tell
pole.
you the amount of times I've tripped over this.
Fine, yeah.
Yeah, those are the
Three.
Oh, okay.
but,
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, did I give you one? I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna do that.
First time.
I'm not camera.
So you're done now, Karen, or is it 6:04?
Smart.
This whole thing today.
I certainly sure could be.
Fat garbage.
Notice, I don't have any. Oh, she was on the whole week.
Yeah, one of them, if we can sum up what that is. 260.
We got a guy that's taking Al's place right there. Temporary.
How do we don't know that he's not showing up?
Huh?
Does he just not call or email or?
I called him, he's working late.
He's
In the dark.
No.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
The meeting started officially, so
I'm ready, yep.
Oh, no, no way.
Maybe
Mm-mm.
3 a.m.
I was like,
Good evening, everybody, and I'm sorry that we're a little late, but welcome to the Village of Webster special meeting. Tonight is a budget workshop night, so we will be looking over actually our sewer and general proposed budgets, initial step anyway, to fine-tune them. First of all, however, we have a presentation by Jason, who is here from Bernard Donegan, on our 2025 sewer rate study that has been done. So, Jason, I will ask you to kind of lead us through what you have here.
Hi, Jason. Do you want me to go to the podium?
Thank you. Then we can all see you.
Good evening, everybody. As Dale said, my name is Jason Schwartz. I'm the president of Donegan Incorporated. We're the village's financial advisors. We work with you on a number of past capital projects and are also working with you on the current capital project for the sewer plant, which is what kind of led to this rate study. We're kind of starting to step into that debt service and had that debt service hit the books, so we thought it was a good time to look at kind of how the current rates look and what that looks like going out in the future in terms of potential needs for rates in the future. So that's what we have tonight. I'd like to just thank everybody at the village, Heather, Danielle, Jake, and the mayor for, we've had some back and forth with them in terms of gathering some of this, making some projections going forward, and working through some different iterations. So just wanted to thank all of them for their time and effort as well and helping pull this report together. So just starting to go into the report, the first couple pages that we have are just a little bit of a background on just like a history of what your rates have been doing. Is there a way for me to scroll or is somebody else want to scroll? Sure, if we want to just go to page 3, there we go. So this is a summary of what the rates have been over the past couple years, and just kind of a breakdown of how the village raises the revenues in the sewer fund. So obviously you have your rate per charge for residential as well as commercial. You have a couple of commercial users that get charged a consumption rate on top of that. So this just gives you a little bit of a trend backward, and also kind of is a good double check for us as we start to build these types of reports to say, are we getting all the pieces, as we lay out this revenue page, does this match with what we're kind of seeing in terms of your actual revenues you've collected, to make sure we're not missing any pieces. So you can see that there that we have right above the dash box, you see the sewer rents, which then kind of flow through on the next page on the, or sorry, 2 pages down on the history. You'll see that those are pretty much almost spot on. So it looks like we have all the pieces there, and then when we go to the next page, page 4, we start to look at a couple of potential scenarios, which we'll kind of see the effects of those as we go forward in the report. But essentially what we're doing is kind of projecting out over the next 5 years. We don't have scenario 1 listed in here on this revenue page, because scenario 1 is essentially just not changing the rates, which we'll get into in a minute. We'll show what that looks like. If we don't increase rates, what kind of impact that has on the fund balance. But then we also have scenario 2 and 3, where options looking at a potential rate increase for next year, for the 25-26 fiscal year, at 2 different levels. You'll see scenario 2 in the blue highlighting there. We said, what if we jump, increase rates up to 260, and then hold off for 2 years to do any other increases? Versus scenario 3, what if we go to 270, and then in 2 years, increase from there if needed. So you can see if you go out 2 years under the 28 column, those increases, when we kind of defer the increase to a smaller amount up front, then we'll have to go to a higher level ultimately further on, because we have more fund balance we draw down that we have to replenish and restore. But we'll see when we get to the actual pages exactly how that all impacts and what kind of our targets were. But that's just kind of a high level summary of what some of the different options are that we'll look at tonight. Okay. If we go to the next page, this is just a history of kind of your operating results over the last couple of years. We've just got that in there for historical reference. Obviously, as I think you're all aware, it's kind of switched back and forth from an enterprise fund to non-enterprise fund, so the numbers are a little hard to discern exactly what's been going on over the last couple of years, but it is there just as a historical data point. And then going to the next page, just real quick before we get into the full update, we did just want to run through kind of the latest updates on where we're at with the sewer plant project. So this is our financial timeline that we use to work with the village to lay out all the pieces. You can see all the purple boxes there are the different legal steps we've taken as we got that authorization in place. And then just a couple things to point out here, a couple of keynotes. We do have in the green box there, right under the purple boxes, we were able to get some RIA grant funds from EFC, so about $1.4 million in grant funds, which helps bring the cost of the project down. And then the other thing that's really helpful is we were able to get that hardship financing. So we get the balance that we have to finance for the project, we're getting at 0%, which is good because it saves us interest expense, and it's also good for purposes of this rate study that we kind of know what our debt service is going to be for this project. Really the only thing that could change it is if we underspend it all and have to bond a little bit less, but we don't have that variable of kind of not knowing what the long-term debt's going to be because we haven't issued a bond yet. In that pink shaded box, you'll see we're in that short-term loan right now with EFC, so we closed on that in February of 2022. and that's good for 5 years if that's out there, if we need the 5 years. If we are ready and wrapped up in construction sooner, then we can convert over to the bond at any point. But we do have that 0% hardship financing in place with EFC, so that's a good thing. The other thing you'll notice on that, so if we just go back to the prior page real quick, we are targeting to make our first principal payment this year at the end of this fiscal year we're in right now, 24-25. So that would be, we've kind of set it up so we could take a 2-step ramp up into the debt service, if you will. So that first payment that we're anticipating to make at the end of this year is about $225,000, and that was in your budget for this year, I believe. And then if you go to the next page, as we continue on, we don't have it penciled in there yet, but we're anticipating in 25-26 that we would take that second step up into the debt service and make that payment against the short-term note. And you'll see that on page 8 where we have the anticipated payback schedule, perfect there. So on the top half of the page, you can see you have a couple outstanding older bonds that are going to be paid off in the next couple of years. There's one that'll be done in 27, and then 2 others that'll roll off the books in 2033. So those are all known existing bonds. And then on the bottom half of the page, we have the proposed payback for the sewer plant project. So again, that's where you see that $225,000 first step this year, and then ultimately going up to about $510,000 per year of debt service as we go forward. Okay. So getting into the projections themselves, basically what we have is a few pages. They're going to kind of look repetitive, but they're just the different scenarios. So we're going to look at revenue projections and expenditure projections, and then what that means for fund balance, and then a few graphs kind of showing some of that information for the visual learners in the crowd. So we'll do that for each of the 3 scenarios. So starting with scenario 1, again, we have on the left-hand side of the page is just your actuals, just to give you a little bit of a benchmark. The middle of the page is the adopted budget for the current year, and then we kind of project out into the future. So you'll see going on in the future in this first scenario, since we're assuming no projected increase in revenues, basically we stay flat all the way out. It's actually slightly down from the budget just because we don't have that federal aid going forward. But we basically stay flat at the current budgeted levels for revenues of $1.4 million approximately. And we have no increases going forward. And then when we flip to the expense page, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a couple line items where we've projected some increases, regarding around salaries and employee benefits and some of those things that we know have rising costs. There are also a few spots, specifically in the sewer treatment plant contractual line in 2026. We have a few one-off purchases that we know that we're anticipating potentially making in the budget in 26. So that's a little higher just for that 1 year, and then you see that drop off going forward into the future. So those are kind of some of the key assumptions on the expenditure page, as well as we've already covered that debt service increasing for the sewer plant project. So you see that $225,000, the current year's budget, about 3/4 of the way down the page, and then that going up to the $510 going forward. And then, so you can see that those expenditures wind up being somewhere around, they vary year to year, but around $1.8 million a year on average through those 5 years that we project out. So when we start to look at that, if we do no sewer rate increases, if we go to the next page, when we look at the fund balance levels, you can see we've got enough that we've set aside that would be okay for about a year or 2. But with that debt service rolling on the books, we start to go pretty negative pretty quickly. You can see those red numbers in terms of what the fund balance would do. And again, on the next couple pages, we just have some charts kind of showing that. You can really see, as those expenditures ramp up over the current year and next year, primarily around that debt service for the new project, if the revenues don't change, we wind up with that gap between the red line and the blue line, and that's what really drives down the fund balance, which you see on the next page, that really kind of falls off the table on us. And that dashed line on this page is what we understand to be the village's targeted fund balance level. So we're kind of trying to stay around that dashed line if we can. So you can see this scenario where we do no rate increases really doesn't accomplish that. So we started to look at some additional scenarios and said, what would it look like if we had to take some increases, what would those look like? So scenario 2, again, as we said, when we look at the revenue page, this is the one where we would go up to 260 for next year, 25, 26, and then wait 2 years for another increase, and at that point, we would go up to 310. If we do that, you can see in 26, 27 on this revenue page, we go up from that, 1.4 million roughly that we had in the base scenario. It'll jump up to about 1,650,000 for those first 2 years, and then when we jump up to the final level, it gets to 1.97 million, which puts us more in line with those expenditure targets. So again, on the next page, we have those same expenditures, nothing different on the expenditure side from scenario to scenario, we're assuming all the same things there. But now you'll see when we get to the fund balance page on the next page, at these levels, what we've kind of targeted, we spend down the fund balance a little bit over the next 2 years, but it's really in keeping in line with where we want the fund balance to be based on the policy, and then we kind of level off at that level and stay right there at that roughly 25 to 30% target of fund balance. You can see these assumptions also all include keeping that 114,000 within in the budget for transfers to reserves. So you can see that restricted fund balance, we're able to kind of grow that fund balance while maintaining the target unassigned fund balance, which means you'll have reserves available as needed to help pay debt service or pay for capital projects, improvements needed down the road for anything like that. Okay, and again, on the graph there, you can see on this first one here, so for a couple years, the expenditures kind of jump up past the revenues, since we're taking a smaller step in this scenario, but then when we take the second step in 2 years, those revenues get ahead of the expenditures, and we have that room to kind of replenish the reserves back to that level, or the unassigned fund balance back to that level where we want it. When we look at the fund balance projection, you can see we do kind of spend down over the next couple of years, but we just barely get below that target level, we stay really close to it, and then we kind of level out and stay right at that with these assumed rates. Okay?
And this option is still allowing us to put stuff into reserves.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Yep, right, so this assumes having 114,000 per year going to the reserves, which you see in that restricted on the fund balance page, showing the growth on that. Okay? And then scenario 3 is a very similar story. Basically, the difference here is we're raising the rates a little higher in the front end, so we don't have to raise them as much ultimately in the back end. So we go to 270 this upcoming year, and then we only need to go to 300 to maintain the targeted fund balance level as we go out, because we don't spend the fund balance down as far, so you don't have to raise it as much to stay at the targeted levels. So in this scenario, you see on the revenue page, we jump up to over 1.7 million. Collected in those first 2 years, and then again leveling out at about 1.9 million in the long term. Expenditures again are all the same, and then when we look at that fund balance level, again we spend down a little bit, but not as far. So then we kind of level out at a 300 annual charge, still maintaining the fund balance right around the target that we'd like to be at. And again, like Danielle said, this scenario also still includes funding the reserves and kind of building that capital reserve or restricted fund balance for future needs. And then again, just on the graphs, similar story there where you see again the gap in this scenario is not as big between the red and the blue in the early years, so then when we flip it back, we don't have to go quite as high in the later years. So that's kind of the overall update on where we're at. One of the things that was talked about in coming up with these assumptions for the different scenarios, because we had considered some other scenarios as well, was that one thing that's nice about this is there have been some changes to the budget in the last couple of years. So having this kind of two-step process of a smaller step right now, something to just make sure we don't have that base scenario where everything falls out in a year or two, but taking a smaller step now, whether that's the 260 or the 270, and then another step in 2 years, gives us some time to kind of evaluate how the next 2 years go and see where that is. And maybe as we update this rate study or see how the next 2 years turn out, maybe you don't have to go quite as high ultimately in that final number. But taking some step now will help kind of diminish how drastic that next step has to be if we don't spend down all our fund balances up front while waiting to take some action down the road. So that was kind of the overall picture and summary. Happy to dig in anything in more detail or take any questions if you have any.
I think I'd have to digest all this.
I think the ultimate goal is to make sure that we're charging enough for sewer to balance the reserves, the unreserves, and still support sewer in the way that it needs to be supported.
Yeah, I understand.
The one thing I'll point out too that I just realized I kind of glossed over when we were talking on the revenues page, we did also project in here increases on that commercial charge as well. So we said whatever we were increasing the residential charge by, we put the commercial rate per gallon up a proportional amount, so it was equal across all users.
Yeah, question back on page 3 with the commercial. I'm just trying to, like, looking at what was projected 24 budget, I'm following that column because it's complete. You've got, there's a calculated consumption at the bottom of like 44 million, or 45 million gallons almost. And that says that that's commercial minus Xerox testing and the rent, which is, I'm assuming the rents are the annual charges on the property tax bills. So that's basically just the commercial other than Xerox testing, and there's no homeowners in this.
Right, I believe so. Yep.
So you divide, each unit is 60,000 gallons, so you divide that out, that's 44 million, it's like 740 units, which would be close to like 160 grand rather than 97 grand. The 220, so I'm just, because I think frankly, one of the mistakes we made when we first started looking at the sewer, saying, hey, how much flow do we have going into the place? This was, years ago when it first went on its own, kind of. We looked at the flow, the total flow, and started dividing that by 60,000. But some users are, one house might use 150,000 gallons in a year and get charged the same as one that's using 20,000 gallons in a year. So, and there's infiltration and stuff. So this was calculated on what the rest of the commercial units are. All right, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, I guess, because, like I said, just calculating that, it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not huge. It was about $70,000 difference. And it looks like we historically, probably wisely, I would think, underestimate what our commercials are going to be. Is that with the total above commercial and actual commercial, the difference in there is difference between like an actual or a estimate for budgeting purposes, not what we actually receive?
Right, yeah, it looks like you're traditionally raising a little bit more than what the actual calculation would bring in. And that's, I kind of double check, but we're just trying to make sure we're kind of in the ballpark at least, so. So again, that's something too, as you're getting to that ultimate total, we can kind of further refine that if we want to make sure we don't kind of overshoot, so to speak, but.
Yeah, I just want to make sure with the number of units, because that's always very difficult. We used to have a separate line, and now it's blended in with Xerox, and it's very difficult sometimes to figure out, what the commercial units are, and it changes, it fluctuates, but I was frankly pretty surprised. It looked like the average was 77 million, then 1 year was 38, then back up closer to 70, and then this 24 was only 44, so it seems like a lot of variation there. That's, I don't know exactly what that's from, but it struck me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any other questions? You guys do something, sir?
I don't have any. Anybody?
Could you go over then once more? Stay on page 3, in line with the question. Calculated consumption in your box, commercial. In 20, you have 70 million. I suppose those are what, gallons? And then 78. And then in 22, you dropped to 38. back up 66, and now down at 45, roughly. Why?
Why was there such a drop?
Up and down, up and down. Is there any idea, or do you have any idea?
I'd have to go back and double check. I mean, it's possible that there was some overlap depending on when the consumption was showing up. And some of that could be like just delayed hitting through on the reads. But we can go back and double check on that and come back with an answer.
Yeah, so, yeah, I wonder if it is billing when it,
That's,
when to get the reads from Monroe County, maybe.
yeah, that's what we've usually seen when you have kind of like those jumps around, is that one of them's got, you know, maybe 5 quarters of consumption versus one's only got 3, just depending on where things hit. So we can go back and double check that, but.
It's almost 30 million gallons.
Yeah, I know.
What would make that so different?
I noticed you had an increase
I got
in
other,
water terms and annual sewer. rates.
they were all increased.
And jumped up.
I'd be interested to know that answer too, because it looks like going down through the whole page, everything is even more than it was in 2021. Except for the rate per gallon. It's even more there, more there, it's there.
What's interesting too is if you look at the actual commercial for 21 and 22, they're pretty close, I mean, $30,000 different, but it was about half the amount of flow. So, yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, we'll double check and look at the back of that as.
Significant amount.
Get back with you.
Thank you, Jason. Were there any other questions for that? Thank you so much.
Anything else?
No,
All
we're
set?
good.
All right, thank you very much.
That's well covered. I get nervous about moving 300 over here. And I know we have to do that to balance, but that's quite a jump in a period of 2 years. Probably have to do that to run the sewer. That's not for sale, but or there's some expenses that we can cut it. Starting to look at
Oh,
the budget
Okay,
for
what kind of
2025.
projection do you have? I'll go with you.
for me, what my thoughts are? So, you know, at the end of the day, it's obviously your call. And I guess I have done this budget at 260. I think when we originally talked, I had done it at 300, was where I wanted to see this. But that's also, I think that's a big jump percentage-wise. I think that going from 260 or 270, it's a $10 difference. This is at, what I gave you guys and emailed, is at 260. We're still using fund balance to balance the budget at 260. So I guess it's, you know, ultimately it's what are the goals for sewer in the next few years? I mean, are we gonna be buying anything, equipment, or is there projects that need to be done in the next couple of years, that can't be held off? I guess would be my recommendation in how we move forward, whether it's 260 or 270, would be based on what we need to do in the next couple of years, not necessarily just this year.
John?
Well, I mean, there's always repairs that need to get done, you know, at sewer.
This would be more like planned stuff, like is there stuff planned, not like.
Yeah, I think like, do we need to buy a vehicle, do we know that,
Well, I mean,
the pump station, you know,
like with this budget, I was hoping to do a pump for one of our pump stations. I mean, I know down there, you know, our telehandler is, 4 years old or 3 years old, and at some point that's gonna have to be replaced. I mean, you know, when exactly, I mean, I might still be able to get something for it on trade-in. But I mean, as for large planned items, I don't have anything large planned. I mean, we got a good project going on right now, so.
I don't think that all of the large things that needed to be done, other than those things that are on the wish list or that need to be fixed because it broke,
Yep.
so
was
this,
included in the $14-15 million that we're spending on renovation of that plant.
Yeah. I mean,
So, other than emergency things,
Yeah, I mean, I'll-
question, you know, yeah, there are the necessities of ferric chloride, et cetera,
Sure.
et cetera.
I mean, other than emergency things and things that are gonna break, I mean, I don't see any major projects coming anywhere in the near future,
Other than the one she already has budgeted for.
other than,
so this budget that you guys have in front of you does include, to replace the grit conveyor and forming an analyzer. The forming analyzer is 30,000, and the grit conveyor is 150K. This also includes 80,000 for the barn for sewer's portion, but it's also being offset in revenue by using reserves for the 80,000. So the 80,000 is more or less a wash in this scenario. So those are two big things that this budget includes that are one-offs. There's 7,000 for a sample shed from the town. And there's also 40,000 for a pump station, a new pump. Not a pump station, a new pump.
Now, that, for the town, is it 7,000 or whatever? Is that done as of this year? Is that something that is ongoing? Or in terms of what we need in order to sample down there, et cetera, are we in debt to the town on a year-to-year ongoing basis? Or are we now, in fact, will we be separate? We have our own testing station, we go down and test that. It goes to the outflow, and unexpected things, I understand, may happen. But other than that, we've been giving a lot of money to the town for moving this and moving that and all sorts of things that we've done with that.
as far as all the money that's owed to the town, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, that'd be with
They keep
Jake's
coming up with
where,
ways
where
to
they
find stuff that we own, I guess, but
Yeah.
I would expect that it's done after this. I mean, this is, we build that, the shed, we'll put our new sample shed, have the chlorine analyzer in it. And then after that, it should be,
You think we're done?
we should be done. I would hope.
So,
Well, what else did they? Seriously?
We did just get a bill today from the town for sewer.
They just
For-
keep like
for
pulling these
28.
bills out of the,
But I think it's for
Yeah, I think that's
testing.
one we got, no, that was for,
I didn't actually open it.
I think that was the one for the final, hopefully it's the final one for the engineering portion of their
Yes,
building.
yes, I'm sorry, it's
For
for engineering, yes.
the Taj Mahal of
Yeah.
a sampling location move.
So when our outflow is pure, do they test their input from us?
What's that?
Just a question.
No, I didn't hear.
He didn't hear it.
The output from our plant and the input to the town plant. Do
There's
they
no-
test what's coming in?
They test their own influence. There's no flow going from ours going into the town plant, into the town processes. It passes, they combine right before they go out. So we test ours. There's 2 sampling locations for us, and the final sampling locations at the town plant where there's certain parameters are tested at the outfall, right before it goes in. So.
Okay.
And that's important because
Very.
we want to test the chlorine residual at that location, so there's a limit on, you know, what you can, it's like quarter of a part per million to discharge chlorine residual. So if we introduce chlorine at our plant and it has a couple miles of pipe to use up the chlorine, then we adjust the chlorine so we're below the limit by the time we get down there. So we don't have to dechlorinate, or we didn't have to look at UV or some different thing, different treatment. But, you know, just talking about the different projects, one of the things we're trying to do, like in this year's budget, was, you know, this end of this week, I got a community development block grant application, and it's coming at budget, but well, actually with that, we could probably do different time of the year, but we're looking at doing some sewer and relining. You know, they've done a great job with grouting. There's a different technology now, especially areas like where it runs through wooded areas, things like that. We want to really focus on that and make sure, because we don't have, you know, backups and roots get in there, and it can be really problematic. So this year, the community development block grants map of areas that are eligible for funding is basically north of the ridge, just to the expressway, and then west of 250. We've done a lot of sidewalks already in those locations. They're not terrible, so I'm planning on doing a shift and just having community development block grant do relining basically from Iroquois Street all the way down Wood Street, just around the corner, and then pick it up again to go from Sanford Street north, on Sherwood, north to Main Street, do that section in there. And we also have in the budget, I don't know if it's in there yet, but that one, a large one where it leaves the town parks and rec and heads towards our plant, cuts through Cherry Laurel and over into that area. That's a large pipe, so you can't go as far. It's pretty pricey when you get up to that size pipe and bypass pumping and stuff. But I think that goes through a wooded area too, so it's really important. I think that would be. But as far as the rate, going from 225, to put it in perspective, 225 to 270 is $45 or 12 cents a day. At the end of the day, I mean, I think with the reserves, but I think, you know, the fund balance, I understand, but I think, Danielle, I don't know if you agree or not, but make sure, because there's nothing cheap at the sewer plant. There's nothing cheap anywhere, really. But I think they have those reserves there because, you know, if we have a truck that, you know, we run over a bunch of nails, we have buy tires, maybe a few $1,000 for tires. If something happens at the sewage plant, the grit concentrator is $150,000. It's a box about the size of this table with, you know, some weirs in it, and it's just, the grit gets dumped into there. It's just, everything is very expensive. I mean, just just because of the nature of the industry, I think. So to have those reserves, it's, 600,000 or 800,000 or a million, it's a lot of money.
But
But a couple things and then it can go pretty quick. So just to have that safety net, I think is a better way. And then you're borrowing against
And
yourself, no
I
interest.
agree with that.
Yeah.
And I do think having gone through this process, and I don't know if I had said it with the mayor when we had met to discuss the budget, but I think it's important, I want to, after we go through this process, want to start a capital plan, that we have a capital plan in progress that goes out 3 to 5 years. I don't necessarily think that a 5-year projection is most accurate because things change and costs change, but I at least want to go
we need to have
3
it,
years.
yes.
I think for budgeting and planning purposes, it's important that we start to put together something that has vehicles and projects that we're estimating out a couple years, 3 to 5 years would be my
Very important.
my hope for
I
us.
agree.
So, I wholeheartedly agree with Jake in terms of, I think the jump from 225 to 270 might be startling to some.
Mhm.
But I do think in order to, help sewer and make sure things are financially secure, I think it's a
Very
reasonable
important.
jump. But there's also a couple things that are missing. If you see something in red, and as Jake had said, he's still looking at the CDBG stuff, so there's nothing in that line, revenue to offset an expense. I have the use of reserves in red because, again, we haven't really talked about reserves, so it's not necessarily a final number. The 165 for the ARP funds stops this current fiscal year, so there's no more revenue from that. So as things sit, I'm preliminary, you see the total revenues at 2.1. I'm also, need a number for the replace of pipes and manholes. You will see, Jerry, you did mention a jump in sewage personnel. There is a jump, because we're including the overtime for the testing on the weekends. So I took an average of the salaries, the time and a half, or double, and included that number in here, which is about 33,000. So there is a jump. Is there particular lines that you guys have questions on that I can answer? Or do you want me to go line by line?
No.
No.
They've had this thing for a week.
Or have we, let's start with this, have we settled the 270? Or are you guys wanting to think about that till next week? For the rate?
I think in fairness with that question, better be answered after we give you the final numbers
Okay.
on things. I just,
So I'm going to take a quote for
The answer is not ready to commit to it yet, I think.
Okay.
that. Definitely 260,
Okay,
or whether we go higher.
okay. I'm good with that. I'm good with that answer. good for sewer?
Yes.
Ready to talk about general fund?
Yeah, let's go to general.
Okay. Okay, so this first page, it says not final in yellow, is tax cap calculation. So currently, for fiscal year ending 2025, our tax cap was 500, our taxes were 596,123. This year, our tax cap limit is $651,627. So we could raise taxes up to that amount potentially. So currently the tax rate's $2.12. You could potentially go up to $2.25 if you wanted.
Since you can point out that you had to go down to stay under it last time.
We did go down last, which
No raising taxes.
which ultimately,
It's
you know,
election year, you
was
can't
the
raise
financially
taxes.
responsible thing to do considering the unreserved fund balance.
Mhm.
And if you look at the second page,
You know what, can I say one thing?
Yep.
Jake actually made a good point to me last week when we were talking about just passing that local law just in case, not that we're going to, but because, I know we're not going to, but the reason we lowered it was to avoid that, obviously, to go over, because we don't want to do that best practice. But he also pointed out to me that the reason you have to stay under that tax cap, but if you add more infrastructure to your village, then that increases what they have to do. So it still increases your workload, so,
Exactly.
it's just something to think about that I didn't think about. That it forces you to stay under because of the tax cap, but
Just makes sense.
we have more work now that we're adding infrastructure. Does that make sense? It's just interesting, I thought that was interesting.
so if you look at the second page that I have stapled to your packet, it's the general unreserved fund balance. So as of, as of 5/31/24, we had 2.7 million in unreserved. Our goal for general fund is $967,169. So it's like 1.7 million that we could potentially move to a reserve.
Mhm.
You good?
Sleepy. And hungry.
So, down below, there's 110,000 coming out of unreserved for the smaller loader,
Mhm.
110 for W18 and W20. And then suggestions of how to use reserves, move 320 to capital for
I see.
barn. And then other projects that haven't been completed, and also the sale of a couple of vehicles, moving them to sale of equipment, which brings us down to 2 million.
Yep.
So that leaves us with about 1 million in unreserved fund balance.
How do you want to use it? Oh, I love it.
I do.
So, no, I say this and show this to you because of the tax rate.
Yes.
And I want you to keep in mind the unreserved fund balance when we're talking about the tax rate.
Mhm.
And I would like us to move that money to reserves or use some of it to offset not raising taxes or maybe raise them a little bit, but not raise them to their full potential.
Raise taxes and the sewer, you won't get reelected.
Oh, that's technical.
I've got just one question, on here, I think the 110 you've got that was already moved for the smaller loader, it's the backhoe, the cat backhoe, and you've got the 55 grand from cat down further, so I think it's accounted for twice. Once it was a trade-in
Oh,
of the 59.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, so,
oh,
yeah, either way.
yeah,
We
no.
lost quite a bit.
okay.
So, I'll look back at it to make sure my numbers, correct. Either way, I want you to keep it in mind as we think about the tax rate and,
Mhm.
how you want to proceed. How you guys choose to proceed. So, as of right now, I put property taxes at the full,
Yeah, I see.
thing.
What was the rate that we were before? I mean, last year,
59, yes, 212 or 596,
and then before that it was,
226.
okay, yeah, so we just got up to 2.26 and went down to 2.12 to stay under the tax cap.
So,
Mhm.
so preliminarily, pre-elim,
Yeah, that works.
yeah. Total revenue right now is 3.3, almost 3.4 million. That includes, and because it's a big jump from well, it's not a big jump from last year. This includes potentially using 364,000 or from reserves. Now, we haven't moved that money to reserves because though that's my suggestion is to move $364,000 to reserves
Mhm.
in order to do some of the projects, because some of the projects have been budgeted for in prior years, like so 26,000 for the break room, doors, windows, 18,000 for, I think it's broken up by the back in the front offices,
Mhm.
and 320,000 of that is for the pole barn. Which is sitting, all of this is currently sitting in unreserved fund balance, not in reserves yet, because I've not suggested for you guys to actually move the money yet.
Well, these are all, this is all money that was budgeted in prior years that never got done, so it's now sitting in reserve. Is that correct?
Well, with the exception of the barn, but yeah, the barn was just decided to allocate part of it to general fund, part of it to sewer, since general fund will be using it.
It's sitting there, and review it.
Yeah.
And get it done. this year.
So, potentially, if the goal is to do it, because there's restrictions, once you put it in there, you have to, go through a couple hoops to take it out. I'm certainly okay with it staying,
If you put it in restricted.
correct. I'm okay with it staying in
Yeah.
unreserved if the plan is to use it this year.
Yes.
So that nobody has to jump through any hoops to get it out. But I want to plan for it, if it's gonna stay unreserved. So, do you have any questions on revenues? Or are we soaking it in?
I think you've done a great job so far. This is,
Thank you. Well, it's also, it's a group effort.
I know,
It is.
I know.
What a team player.
Team village over here. We got tough to prove it.
She did. Chris got her a Team Village cup for Christmas. Hashtag Team Village.
We make some pretty good money off the cell tower.
Yes, and we just got a little over 400,000 for Q4 sales tax, so.
Was that higher or lower than last year?
You know, I didn't look.
I think it seemed higher, but
I think I have to go at that level to find out.
yeah.
Because it does, she does explain it in the letter. So,
Do you know
What's that? I
that
think it
amount?
went down a little bit, didn't it?
Down?
At least one quarter.
I know last quarter went down, the fire one that we received, I think went down. I didn't read the letter for this one. Nor did I bother to compare it to last year. And so if you move to expenses, projects that are in this, or capital projects include the break room, doors, windows, and DPW, a six-wheel dump truck, new computers, the pole barn. And I believe that I did not. And a vehicle for building inspector.
Our plans, I guess, out, the direction we want to go this year for the DPW stuff is looking at, you know, in the past few years, we've done whole roads and gutters. We're looking at the Dean Spring where it comes up next to the jewelry store there. It's getting pretty rough. So we want to do that area and the back parking lot here. This winter has been, put a lot of havoc on a lot of streets, but luckily, I guess we're in pretty decent shape, and we can use CHIPS funding only once every 10 years for the roads. So we've been doing those, you know, with guys have been doing a great job, you know, from starting with Clancy and then with Jimmy Scott, with doing the scheduling and with the crack sealing and micro paving. We're really, frankly, we're catching up, so that was one of the things we wanted to do. I mean, there's, you know, certain streets, we've got to come up with a longer term plan, and I think it's part of the BOA, and that is commercial and Donovan areas. But one of the things we wanted to do is CHIPS funding can also be used for equipment. So we want to look at a truck, because of the difficulties that's on the horizon with some of the trucks and with the electric vehicles and some of those requirements. It's not, we're not going to be required to get an electric dump truck, but the manufacturers and the companies, the suppliers, aren't going to be able to sell unless they sell a certain number. Like they sell one electric one, and they can open up for 10 or 15 regular trucks to sell. But those trucks with new emissions stuff, it keeps going and going and going. All the consensus is that it's going to continue to get worse. So we're going to try to get one now before it's even harder and way more expensive to get one, and then utilize and apply those CHIPS funds towards that, so we can get all our CHIPS funding, but use it for equipment 1 year and kind of catch up with the other, in the other roads. Also, we've had discussions with the mayor about some of the parks and rec, but that's a separate budget completely, so some of those. But, you know, we're looking at surfaces, the one surface for Chance Park. We have to get some other quotes at it. The one surface is like 190 grand for where we are now with that, with a surface that's a permanent surface. And the other one was like 101, you know, Wilmerite Park, just as it is now, without expanding that for the surface. So maybe that's something we look at, you know, because Park and Rec is, the only way we get Parks and Rec into that fund is when, on new builds, and there's not a lot of space left, so that fund's not going to be replenished to the degree that it has been in recent years with, you know, Brittany Woods and with Greenbrier Crossing and all that, so, we're looking at those things. And again, our normal, you know, crack filling, micro paving, those things, $3 you spend on that saves you, you know, $4 or $5 down the road,
Yes.
so that's really good money spent. And then sidewalks, some of our, with areas that need it primarily, like Phillips Road, we want to expand off of, coming from Bridge. It's a really highly used sidewalk, and it's not, we'd like to make that one wider, and, you know, fix up, there's a few areas there, and try to use, you know, some of the road work budget down, but move it towards sidewalks and different things. I think that's it. And then we discussed CDBG, just roughly it's about, for the section on Wood, in Sherwood, it's about 125,000, and we'd asked for about 75, just short of 75 from CDBG for that. Hopefully we get that. That'll, you know, offset it. So we're spending 50 grand and getting $125,000 worth of work done, which would be a pretty good deal.
Are we doing wood and Sherwood?
No, we're doing, that's what we're gonna put in the budget, or I'm gonna try to apply for with the community development block grant that goes into this budget, would be to do the cut through from Iroquois Street, and then follow Wood Street all the way down till it turns the corner, and then kind of hopscotch. So John and I were even discussing it as late as today too, is kind of feel, we want to get that section done because it goes through the woods, and you can get tree roots and intrusion in there, and it's smaller clay pot tiles. But then do the part where it's taking it away. We don't want to speed up everything because you got a cleaner pipe or a newer pipe, and inside it's going to go from a clay pipe that's to a PVC pipe, and then have it still restricted or going slower when it's down the line. We'd rather, you know, open up the exit first and then
Makes sense.
then speed it up. So we're going to start on that north end of the street and bring that up, so.
So this is with sewer?
What's that?
This is with sewer?
Yeah, it's part of sewer there. The reason why we're doing that area on Sherwood is because the main's 2-foot clay sections. And, you know, we have grouted those sections, but when you're grouting 2-foot sections, the money goes real quick.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to get that section line, try to work on our 2-foot mains.
So that money's for sewer that you're going to be using out of this CDBG money. That does not show up in the sewer budget, right? So that's out of general?
No, it'd be a sewer budget, but I haven't gotten those numbers. The problem, this time of year, the county is redoing all their bids. They usually do them in February and March. And so like the sewer cure-in-place pipelining was not even, you can't even get it on the website, so I had to try to get quotes for it from the from the supplier or the contractor, which is hopefully, you know, just gonna match what the county price is at the end of the day, but there's not a, you know, the pricing is not available. And they don't even, you can't even look at last year's and estimate it, because they take it down when they're working on it.
Yeah, you can.
So, I mean, I have last year's when we did other stuff, but it's just nice to know,
I'd
because,
like today, yeah,
yeah, sometimes they,
today's world.
yeah, sometimes they change a little more than you think they would, so. But again, yeah, so that's gonna show up 125 on the revenue, or expense side, and like 75 on the revenue side. So it'll be a net change of 50 grand in the, or increase in the budget, because they're both going up. And last year, we've done, with CDBG stuff, we've done lining before, but we split it between sidewalks and lining. It's just the areas that are eligible this year aren't necessarily right where we want to do them. And when I say sidewalks, the sidewalks wouldn't be done until spring of '26 anyway, if we were doing sidewalks. In the community development block grant because we don't find out that we definitely got it until like September timeframe.
So it's
Yeah.
gotta be
Yeah.
26.
So it's the following, as soon as we can in the spring, we do it.
Mhm.
But without waiting for CDBG stuff, we should be able to do the other part of Phillips Road within, this budget, and if that makes it through ultimately. But we have Phillips Road north of the ridge on for this year, that was a CDBG
Yeah,
project. That's a joint
that's a
project
good-
with the town.
I used to walk that when I worked at Xerox. That I walked all the way up and through the village and down with there, yeah. So, yeah, widening it, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so Phillips Road is, there's a
Yes.
lot of use.
Yes,
A
it
lot of
does.
use on those sidewalks, so.
Yeah.
Are there any particular lines that you guys have questions on? Do you want me to go through them individually? Do you wanna,
If Chief says no, it's
Really don't have any questions. to be honest.
I have a question. 5142, 430. Road salt. I know the past has been very kind to us. What we have spent on that. This year, I'm sure there's more than $4,500 at this point.
yes.
But that's a heck of a jump from what it has been sort of averaged out to 40,000.
Yeah, they changed some things with the road salt. Number one was the price that keeps going up, and they changed the amount you have to buy. Our goal, certainly should show up on all of this, it goes back to 2020. So our goal is, we used to kind of ask for what we average or historically had used is about 330, 350 ton. Now, if that's what our average use is, we used to have to buy 70% of what you asked for. So if we said, hey, let's ask for 350 because that's normally our allocation, that's normally what we give, we would have to buy, what's that, 210 or 240, whatever ton. So if we had a slow year, we'd have to get that, or if we had a really busy year. The problem with asking for just what you use, and we changed our target, we tried to make what we're forced, our allocation, what we're forced to buy, when our average use is. And that does a couple of things. If we have a really busy year, then we end up, you're only guaranteed up to 130% of what you asked for. And then after that, they don't have to bring anything, and it's not, and then it's market rate. And one year it jumped from like $48 or $42 to like 85. This year it's 62. So if you had to buy it, and especially this year, you'd be probably $150 a ton or something. So, so right now we're buying it at 62 a ton. And we asked for 550 ton, knowing that the last few years we've used 275. But
That's what you have to do. Don't know.
But it doesn't go bad. So
No,
what we try to do
exactly.
at the end of every year is fill, it doesn't go bad and it doesn't get any cheaper. So we try to fill up our bin at the end of the year.
The best you can, yep.
Yep. So
Just
that
my
it's
hill.
there.
Common sense, Jake. Oh, please, I
No, we don't use it.
just,
no.
If you don't use it, it goes into unused fund. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So if if we're in the positive at the end of the year, that balance goes into the reserves.
It's like what you didn't use.
If you got a truck fill left, put it in Daryl's backyard and use it.
No, every year we try to fill our
Oh,
bins
yeah.
up because it's not, it doesn't go bad and it's not getting any cheaper.
no,
We'd be
in fact,
foolish,
it's much.
we'd be foolish to have room and not
Not
fill it.
you, yeah.
Because if it's 62 this year, it's gonna be 68 next year.
We do this, we do all this thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
Common sense.
not know we try to pass them back and forth.
Well, it is.
And they're really-
Common sense.
It's true.
But there's a shortage of salt. Why is it, you know? Are the mines stopped or?
No, I think that they kind of underestimated a little bit the demand based upon the last few years. I also think that they're talking in mind that people are, it's like toilet paper during COVID, people are kind of panic buying
Yeah.
and stockpiling stuff. So, I mean, they're supposed to deliver to us within three business days. That's taking about 10. And then the state was going to step in and help. They offered to bring us an emergency load. We said, no, we're doing okay right now, so if somebody else could use it, we don't want to hoard it. You know, we don't want to take it. And they delivered our salt that we had asked for from the salt mine. And like the first half of the load was on the 11th, the next half was on the 12th. And then the afternoon of the 12th, state brought us another
Turn it on.
110 ton of salt. But they drove it, they loaded up along the Hudson River south of Albany, drove it all the way here. One of the truck drivers, when he was here, asked how to get to Mount Morris. Because he was going to pick up salt at the salt mine that they claimed had nothing left. He was picking up salt there, taking it to Syracuse.
John protested, yes.
Was-
You were telling me that, so I was laughing
This is
so
the
hard.
state helping us, I
That's
guess.
large.
That's New York State.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the salt mine said they could use the help, but the state was just uncoordinated. The stuff that they gave us had the same order number of the loads that we just got. So we asked for 80 ton, we got 80 ton, and then we actually got 180 ton
Yeah,
for that load. But they already supplied us, so when they go back,
bottom line is, thank you very much, and you'll have it next
and I had to end
year.
up canceling another,
We all voted, you're getting pizza, right?
I had to cancel another load, and when I don't know what they're gonna do, because I'm sure the state's gonna go back on the salt mine and say, hey, you didn't fulfill. They're gonna be like, yeah, we did. I delivered it before you did. But they're not, I would say, if I was a state, I'd say, do the salt mines. What do you need?
Absolutely, yes.
What orders do you have?
Yes.
All right, give me this one, this one, this one, and this one, we'll take care of
Yep.
those for you.
Yep.
And it's coordinated, it's just uncoordinated. I mean, thank them for helping, but.
But we got it, and that's the way it is, yes. Who cares?
I have another question. I have a question. If you go to 85, 60, 100, shade trees, personnel, history, small, 9,000 is the greatest amount, 9,000. We budgeted 16, we're at 2, we budgeted 16 for this coming year. Historically, 16 is 6,000 more than what we have done over 5 years. The other is shade trees contractual. Taking a look at that number across there, biggest is suddenly $7,800 and now 13, although it was amended down to 74, we're back up at 13. And I don't think those numbers need to be that high historically, so why?
Did you say, were you talking about the personnel line?
I'm talking about, it would be,
Contractual and personnel.
Or just,
yeah,
Yeah, the 100 lines are basically a pie.
yeah, that's,
And
that
it
has to
depends how
change.
wide of a slice, they all add up
Yeah,
to the total
it's a
wages,
it's a
so if you
percentage.
take it out of that, you just put it somewhere else.
Percentage. So, I mean,
but
at the end of the
then
day,
we'll go to contractual.
Yeah, and it's the difference between, normal, I think that varies every other year, because there's EAB treatment in one year, and there's not EAB treatment in another year. And then that's a 434 line, or is that the,
the .4.
oh, it's, okay, yeah, the 434 line is the one, is the tree removals and trimming, and that's got, our normal, we trim 20% of the trees every year. And the shade tree, the 100 line, again, the 100 line is just, you take all the 100 lines and that makes the pie, and you slice it up different ways, but if you can make one smaller, then another one gets bigger.
Yeah.
Common sense.
$5,000.
And contractual or 100?
It's a contraction. $5,000. We don't have to, think it went up that much to cut tree limbs.
I mean, we're not cheap.
It's the tariffs.
We'll give you the trimmer, Daryl, you could just go around
I
and do
know.
it.
Well, that's
They'll
the
have to buy
difference
some
of just
tree
from the
size.
amendment.
They're not going to cut limbs.
It's all the trees. Trim them.
They're not gonna use our tools.
Yeah, fine.
Pause for motion.
What'd you do?
I'll do it, you did.
Been doing this all this.
Man, you are froggy. He is froggy.
Go by his office.
No, I
and there's
didn't,
no-
no. I've got some things I want to look at it, but I don't have any immediate questions. Usually when we look at this, we gotta make up for time.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, hence the people we put in place, you're not seeing what we were seeing before. Because we're prepared better each year.
Yes.
We used to.
Good job, Danielle.
It's a team effort.
Do you remember how sometimes we got this and how negative we were at, and we had to figure out how to get to
can't,
a positive.
Yeah.
So that's hats off to all these guys.
Yep.
Well, and
Explanation on.
Is it a 100 line?
You gotta clean all the salt up that you want down.
200 line.
Okay. Street cleaning equipment?
Yeah.
Then we're gonna need a new sweet sleeper, because the salt's gonna
81.7.
deteriorate it, so.
Is that an initial because of something you last year?
That's the lease payments, I think, on
Yeah.
that.
We got a new street sweeper.
yeah, it's moved down to 97, 85, 26. Because that's where the auditors reclassed it last year. Or that's where I budgeted it for, yeah.
I won't take any more
You know where we are, Daryl.
He sure does. What is this?
It's been taking advantage of it.
In the 12 years we've been doing this, I think our biggest concern has been salt and screws, Jake.
Salt and screws, yep. And ferric chloride, looks that one too.
I like that one.
And my cooler.
And your cooler?
Don't rile the eagle up.
I have no idea what that would mean, so I was letting that go.
Can I tell them what our call sign for you is?
Seagull.
She's an eagle. The eagle has landed.
Seagull. Does, do you know why?
Tell them what you did.
Yeah, it's my,
He did that.
premature announcement.
Tell them what you did, the funny part, over the speaker.
I went over the loudspeaker and said, the eagle has
No.
left the building, but he was still back there and I heard him giggle, it was very funny. So now he watches.
She hears the roars from the office staff.
It was funny, because he's like, he's standing there and he's like, she talking about me? Yes, she is.
So now he just comes in and does
Okay.
this.
Yeah, my questions are here.
We have another budget workshop on the,
Next
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
yep,
Right from today.
I won't be here.
You won't.
You're gonna be in-
Hopefully, yeah.
Down south.
someplace
Well, you're gonna miss all the fun.
Key.
Ivy Island.
I'm pretty
That
sure we're gonna
sounds-
have more fun here.
That sounds nice.
Enjoy.
Yes, sir.
And then on this, first meeting of the
I'll be here.
just hope the weather warms up a little more.
Better than here.
Yeah.
God, this is
So-
terrible.
If it's 25 degrees out, you're gonna be better in shape than this place.
One time we were in Orlando and, staying at Hyatt there, and the temperature was down to about 38, maybe 40. The maintenance guys are wearing coats like yours.
Yeah.
And
Well,
hoods
they're not
and everything,
used to it.
and we're out at the pool.
I was, when we were little, my parents used to go to Hawaii every year. One year they took us kids and we were hanging out with some kids we met down there. And it was got in the 70s at night and they were wearing hoodies and pants.
Well,
And
yeah,
we were
but they would.
toward,
Yeah.
shorts and t-shirts. I'm like, aren't you freezing? I'm like, it's 70 out, what do you mean?
Well, they have no idea.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
Well, thank you, thank you.
Nice
very
job.
Good job, Danielle.
Thank you.
much. Glad we have you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Huh? You want to come to the podium, sir?
Are we done?
No, we don't have to have a motion. We didn't have a motion to open it.
We did
This
not
is a
do that.
workshop.
It's a workshop, no big deal.
Here.
Still a legal meeting.
Oh, right down here.
Yeah,
Nah,
You're good.
No,
it's in a VYO, or
I think we're good.
Yeah.
VRBO. Little cottage, 800 square foot cottage.
Play the mayor.
okay.
Heather, when are you going to the Keys?
I leave 28th.
That's gonna be an announcement.
I need another call sign then. That's already taken.
All right.
Whatever.
You guys. Oh, everyone enjoy the rest of your
Is the
week.
meeting closed? We gotta turn off the camera.
Yeah,
Great.
meeting is adjourned.
Tell Annie I said hi.
Anybody object? No. All in favor?
She expected me to just sell it for dinner, so I'm eating all the candy I can.